Hi guys, it is Aoife from Words of Clover and I am here to do a book tag today. So I saw Kiran from Rotherby Reading do this book tag a while ago and I just thought it was such a great tag that I really wanted to do it. I listed it down and now is the time for me to do this tag, and it is called the Fuck 2020 book tag, and I mean that is just the motto of the year, I think, so I'm here for it. I will leave Kiran's video down below as well as the original tag creators video down below if you guys want to check them out. So the first question is just to share some good stuff that has happened in 2020 and some bad stuff if you want to. And for me, one of my main life changes, good things that happened to me in 2020 was obviously that me and my boyfriend moved in together and we are now living together quite harmoniously most of the time, and yeah, we are just enjoying our life together. We kind of moved a step forward and that was really nice. We are currently in our second lockdown together. The first lockdown we were apart, the second lockdown we were together, so yeah, that's just something that's been really nice and that has happened. And part of me wonders if COVID and stuff hadn't have happened, this probably would it would have eventually happened, but it would have taken longer to happen, if you know what I mean, because I think there was a lot of different reasons that came together up with us moving in together, but some of that reason was due because of the initial separation during the first lockdown that happened. Some good things as well, I really enjoyed working from home. There's some days that it would be nice to be in the office and I do miss some bits and pieces about being in the office and commuting and being through town and just the hustle and bustle of everyday life. Sometimes you miss it. But I do definitely have a new appreciation for working from home as well. I always used to be someone who said I wouldn't be able to do it all the time, and obviously I've been doing it for almost a full year now, and it's been grand and I've enjoyed it, and I kind of appreciate home so much more and all those little bits and pieces that make up home and what home is to different people. So I've really enjoyed that, and I also think a really good thing that has happened from this year as well is the fact that so many businesses have realised working from home is an option, and there's so many companies and businesses now that can't deny people working from home when they ask for it when things go back to normal. I definitely think in my own company we won't be forced to go back full-time 5 days a week now. I think it'll probably be a little bit more lenient. If we wanted to work from home 1 day a week or 2 days a week, we probably would be able to, because we have proven that we are fully able to work from home. So yeah, that would just be really nice. That's just really nice that those options is obviously there, and I think it makes it so much easier for people, particularly people who might have anxiety or aren't able-bodied and can't maybe physically get into an office every day, and it's much easier for them to be at home working from home. I think the fact that it's proven that this is a way people can work and work extremely effectively, I think that's great. Second question is, what book did you love at the beginning of the year? And God, the beginning of the year feels so long ago. It really feels 2 years ago. It was a different world. But a couple of the books that I really loved at the beginning of the year that I absolutely gushed about, one of them was An Elephant in My Kitchen by Francoise Malby-Anthony. This is an audiobook I read, and it's about Francoise's life. She was originally married to a man who he wrote a book, I think, called The Elephant Whisperer or something, and they basically had this animal park together, a reserve for wild animals, particularly elephants, in South Africa. And I think a few years after he wrote that book, he died, and this is kind of Francoise's memoir following that point, where she became a widow and she was suddenly left to run this reserve on her own. And she had only ever she'd come into that, she didn't have as much experience as her husband had with the animals, and she was suddenly left to figure it out on her own. And this is kind of her journey doing that, and she kind of looks back at different things from her past as well, and some of her fond memories of the different animals that she's cared for. And I really loved it, and I really loved her memories with some of the animal orphans, particularly the orphans that she looked after, elephant orphans and rhinos, and it's just so adorable. But it's also incredibly sad, and there are some really traumatic events that happen in this book, particularly near the end of it. And it's actually not one I 100% recommend to people, because it is so sad, and it doesn't, because of things that happen, there's not a particularly happy ending to it, because it doesn't end the way you would want it to, basically. And yeah, so it doesn't end on a particularly happy note, but at the same time I really love just Francoise's story and her stories with the animals and stuff, because that's what I love. So yeah, it's a little bit of I loved it, but I also wouldn't really recommend it to people unless they guard your heart while reading it, because there are some very, very sad moments in it. The book I absolutely loved as well was Climate Justice by Mary Robinson. This is a compilation of kind of stories compiled by Mary Robinson about people, mostly women and women of colour and Indigenous people, who have been affected by climate change, and how they, as like people who live in like smaller areas of the world and small countries and countries that aren't really thought about, they're not like one of the, you know, the big countries of the world that like have this like powerful voice, how they are the ones that end up being affected by climate change, when bigger countries like the United States and England and France and Ireland and countries like that, when we don't do our job properly in terms of climate change, we are not the ones that are suffering. It's mostly women, mostly people in these kind of more developing countries, particularly women of colour, and particularly poor women of colour. These are the women that actually, these are the people that actually get affected the most by climate change. And this was basically this kind of story, and I just love the different stories from around the world, and I loved hearing these voices, and it just made me think so much, and I absolutely love this book. It is just brilliant. Number 3 is a book you were looking forward to that ended up not being great, and for me it's going to be The Animals of Lockwood Manor. This was in my video at the start of the year, which was my 5-star predictions video. I literally have only read I think 2 books out of that video. I really need to get a move on with it so I can do another one. But this one was on my 5-star predictions. This was a historical fiction. It was around about a woman who moved to this kind of manor house in the country during World War II with these like stuffed animals from like the Natural History Museum, and it was how they were protected during the war. And there was like parts of this that I loved. There was like this creepy atmospheric feel to the book. This like place, this Lockwood Manor place, was like there was a lot of things going on with it, and things felt a bit weird. The house itself felt like a character. It reminded me a little bit of Manderley and Rebecca in the way it was very watchful, and it was creepy, and it just seemed alive in a way. But the general story kept repeating itself and eventually became quite boring for me, and yeah, it ended up disappointing me a lot. I think I only gave it like a 2 or 3 stars when I really thought it was going to be a 5-star read. Number 4 is a book that surprised you this year. I have 2 for this as well. One of them is The Mercies by Kiran Millwood Hargrave. I always get her name wrong. What surprised me was because I'd read something else by this author, which was The Deathless Girls, and I felt so disappointed by that book, and it was just not what I wanted at all, and it was just, yeah, I just really didn't like that book. And then I read The Mercies, and I didn't actually put the 2 and 2 together that they were the same author. I think until I was like had started the book, or was like halfway through, and I realized they were the same author, and the stories just felt so different. The Mercies just felt so much better, like thought out. The characters seemed a lot more real. There was a lot more plot to it than The Deathless Girls. That, yeah, it ended up surprising me that like once I found out they were the same author, I was a bit like, oh no. But then because they were so different, and because my enjoyment was so different for the 2 of them, and The Mercies did surprise me in the end, because I did really enjoy that book. And then another book that surprised me this year was Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout. This is a book that I read on audiobook, and it's one that I've heard a bit about, and I had read another book by Elizabeth, which I think was My Name is Lucy Barton, which was like, it was nice. It wasn't amazing, but it was nice. And there was just something about Olive Kitteridge that really burrowed itself into my heart, and I think a lot of other people have felt this with Olive, but for some reason I wasn't expecting it to. So it did surprise me in that way, that I didn't realise I would feel so much for Olive, even though she is not a nice character, she's not a likeable character, but there's something in the way that you just learn about her that you end up really wanting to root for her and really feeling for her by the end of the novel. So yeah, that did surprise me, that I did end up feeling that way for Olive. Number 5 is a book you like but nobody else does, or they don't talk about it enough. For me, I'm going to talk about a recent read, which is something that I haven't seen a whole lot of people talk about, but it is a very kind of niche Irish book, so I didn't expect people to talk about it, but I would love to see more people talk about it in the next year, in the next few years. I have a feeling this is hopefully going to be nominated for prizes next year. I really hope it does, and it like extends to an international audience, because I think it deserves that praise. And that is A Ghost in the Throat by Ghríofa. I talked about this recently. I absolutely love this. This is like part memoir, part essay by Doireann about her time as a young mother, kind of her experiences, like kind of identifying as a mother, and then also at the same time going through these pregnancies and going through this time with her young children. She becomes fascinated by this character in Irish history. Evelyn Dove, who wrote this really famous queen now called the Queen for Art O'Leary, and she kind of became fascinated with this character in history and decided to try and find out as much about her as she could. And there's just a really interesting discussion in here about women in history, how women are remembered in history, and particularly in beside like male counterparts, and how women tend to be like erased from history because of like their male counterparts that have done like that much, like, you know, a little bit more. So like their things are worth remembering more so than like the women in their lives. And it's just very interesting the way Doireann explores this in this book, while also exploring her own identity, as a mother and as a woman in history. And it's just really, really interesting. And again, it's one I think I will come back to at different points in my life and have different experiences with. And it's one of those books that I already can't wait to reread, because I think, as I said, I'll have so many different experiences and take different things out of this book every time I read it, and I love that. I'd like to see more people have been talking about this book, but I would love to see even more people talk about it, is Don't Touch My Hair by Emma Dabiri. It's basically a book about the history of black hair and how the history of black hair can be like linked back to racism and systematic racism and racial injustice. And it is just so brilliant and so fascinating, and I learned so much about this book and I absolutely loved it. I've been raving about this book for months, and I think more and more people should be reading it. And literally just earlier, a couple of hours ago, Emma announced the title for her new book, which is coming out in March, and I cannot wait for that one. So that's a great one to read again. I'll probably be reading that one during the Irish Readathon next year, so that's really exciting. So yeah, this one is definitely one people should be reading, and they can then go on and read her next book out next year. And then one more I wanted to talk about is Call Him Mine by Tim McGowan. This is a book I've talked about a little bit this year. I read it in March. This is kind of a crime mystery thrillerish book set in Mexico, written by Tim, who is an Irish man, and in the story we are following an Irish journalist whose boyfriend / photographer is murdered in Mexico after trying to basically follow up the wrong story that is connected to a drug cartel in Mexico. And then the character in the book ends up kind of taking it upon himself to try and figure out what exactly is going on, and he ends up in this like really kind of terrifying story expose that's linked to this drug cartel, that's linked to a lot of murders and a lot of people going missing, and he's kind of putting his own life on the line to figure what the hell is going on. And it is just so great. It's unlike anything I've ever read before. Tim McGowan himself worked as a journalist in Mexico City, so a lot of things that he's like talking about, he knows what he's talking about. And like the story itself, I think, was inspired by a story he had heard from someone else. So yeah, it's just really interesting, everything about this book. So I 100% recommend this book. I wasn't as mad about the sequel. I would kind of go into this book as a standalone. I don't think the sequel is needed, and I don't think it's as good as Call Him Mine. But yeah, Call Him Mine is really good, and I 100% recommend it. I would love to see more people talk about it, because I've never seen anyone else talk about it but me, and I think more people need to read it. Question number 6 is a book you want to come out already this year in 2020, and I presume this is for like during the year, if there was a book that was like at the end of the year was going to come out and you wanted it to come out earlier, but it's almost the end of the year, so I don't really have an answer to this question. I guess one of my answers would be I would love to be able to read Emma Dabiri's new book as soon as possible, but I'm going to have to wait till March. And then number 7 is what book were you looking forward to that got pushed to 2021? And I actually don't know of any books that have been pushed to 2021. I think Alwyn Hamilton's new book got pushed. She wrote Rebel in the Sands, which I really, really enjoyed. I think she had a book that was supposed to be coming out in like August or September, and I think that got pushed to next year at some point, but I don't think that was COVID related. I think that was just to do with writing, and she decided that what she had she wasn't happy with, and she wanted to rewrite sections or rewrite the entire book, so it did get pushed. But yeah. Number 8 is finally, what book will you think of when you think of 2020? And I think one of the ones I will think about is probably Don't Touch My Hair by Emma Dabiri, because I was kind of prompted. I knew about this book in March because Leanne, who's my co-host for the Irish Readathon, she had read it and really, really enjoyed it, so it was kind of like on my radar. But then when everything happened in June around in the States, and there was the Black Lives Matter protests, and there was like this real emphasis that everyone just needed to step up and do better and learn and educate themselves, and yeah, like just take that step and, you know, take charge of your own education and go out and look for sources. I kind of knew this is a book that I'd wanted to read, and it really spurred me to just like to read it. And yeah, so I did, and I absolutely loved it, and it's one of my favorite books of the year, and it is a book I will reread, and I have encouraged others to read. I've bought it for others, and I will never stop talking about how great it is, and I will never probably stop talking about how great Emma Dabiri is. And yeah, that was definitely like spurred, and I wish that hadn't taken me. I wish I had read it sooner. but I can't control that now. What I can control is like how I read in the future now. So yeah, it's definitely a book that will make me think of 2020 around like just both a really great reading experience, but also a time in history and a time in their lives where crazy things were happening in the world, and it was very hard to know what to do. And for me, one of the things I only knew what to do was to turn to books to educate myself and to try and make things better in that way, even if it was just to educate myself and therefore talk to others and try and educate them. So yeah, but that is it for this tag. I've kind of rambled on a bit, I'm sorry. I'm not going to tag anyone, but I think this is a great tag to do, and I think if anyone wanted to do this tag by the end of the year, please feel free to tag you. Thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.